Welcome to True Crime Wine Wednesday. I am Sher and I am so glad you found me. I really missed you guys last week. I don't know if it was just like the spring cleaning vibe that was going on, but I just started getting really overwhelmed because I felt like I hadn't done a lot while I've been recovering from surgery, and it just really consumed me. By the end of last week, I was like, oh, where did the week go? I didn't work this week. So apologies. Thank you for being patient with me. I'm back and I really missed you a lot, but I do feel lighter to have gotten a lot done that I needed to. Also hope I've solved the mic issue. I think now our issue this week is going to be that it's going to be too loud and the voice is going to be blown out. But listen, I just appreciate you all being here for the kinks, for the trials, tribulations, successes, you name it. Also, the merch purchases. I'll move my mic a little bit. Always repping Merlot lately. If you don't follow me on Instagram, I put a little post on there. It's Merlot all day, every day. Pants, no pants. Today I am wearing pants for you, but mostly I'm not. So anyways, thank you guys, everybody who has purchased merch. If you want to snag some Merlot merch or some other stuff, it is shopsherlandale.com. And I remember that this time, so woo! All right, yeah, let's get started. Oh, I also realized this week that CrimeCon UK is only like 3 weeks away. So something else I started getting really overwhelmed about because I'm like, I haven't even prepared. What am I gonna wear? What am I gonna pack? So got all of that stuff done. I cannot wait. So if you are in the London area, I hope you come out. I'll be there from June 8th. Or wait, what days am I there? 8, 9, 10. No, 9, 10, 11. Holy 9, 10, 11. June 9, 10, 11. You might want to check the website just to make sure. CrimeCon UK. But yeah, 9, 10, 11. See you there. Really hope you go there. There's so many fun people going there. My guy Gavin will be there with me, which I'm really excited about because I have like pretty high social anxiety. So like having somebody I know is going to make me feel really good. My best friend is also going to be coming. If you guys saw the live, you would have seen her out there. She'll be coming and talking about the Sippendale Foundation. And I just really hope I see some of you guys. Then I just like feel like I have like some more friends and support there because I'm a freak. So anyways, okay, let's get started. I hope I see you there. Great lineup of guests. It's 3 weeks away. You still have time. Please come out. All right, riddle time. Today's riddle is, what do you buy to eat but never consume? All right, today's case that we are talking about is one I came across years ago. I'm talking like, it's got to be like 10 years ago when I first came across 48 Hours Mystery. And it was one of those cases where I will just randomly be just off in space somewhere, or I'll see something, or usually when I hear somebody talk about Alaska, I think about this. And I do this like, I want to say like on not a monthly, but like maybe like every few month basis, I'll think about this case. But I hadn't really followed up and looked into it recently, like where things stood. And I was just like mind blown. We're talking about the murder of a gentleman named Kent Leppink. He was a fisherman who was caught up in a very seductive not love triangle, like a love hexagon is what I've heard it be referred as. And it makes sense. And he was killed in Hope, Alaska in May 1996. Now, there have been quite a few theories about the murder and also a couple arrests. But like I said, I was floored to find the latest update when I checked in on this case. Before we get started, if you could make sure that you are subscribed and notified to the channel, it would mean so much to me, more to me than I could ever put into words. And I've seen a lot of people lately be like, hey, did you change your channel? Or did I get unsubbed for some reason? And I never used to believe when people said that this would happen. And I'm like, yeah, you probably did. I don't know why you're getting unsubbed, but please check to see if you are unsubbed. And if you are and you would like to be, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps me so much. And we are so close to 200,000 subscribers. So yeah, very excited about that. Anyways, okay. Let's get going, guys. So Kent wasn't initially from Alaska. He grew up in Lakeview, Michigan. He was number 2 of 4 boys to his parents, Ken and Betsy Leppink. He's described as someone who's like down for any adventure, had tons of energy. And his mom described him as just somebody who lived life on the edge all the time. The Leppinks were a family that was very well known in their area. They owned a chain of grocery stores that was named Leppinks Food Centers. And Kent was being trained to take over a large portion of the chains and being head of the operations. I read he was not like a spoon-fed son or anything like that, though. He worked his way up, started at in the deli department, in the bakery, did this in multiple locations before kind of being taught the ropes. People who worked with Kent and knew him personally describe him as like a little bit awkward, not overly social, kind of tossed out very inappropriate jokes I've read at very inappropriate times. But in terms of like the family and learning the business, his family felt like he had what it took. He was on the right track to be like the main guy. Then his brothers, who were also working within the family business, found out that some money had gone missing while their parents were on a vacation and had trusted them to take over the stores, see how they did before like fully handing over the reins. And it was like around $200,000 that was missing. So the brothers spoke about it with their dad and believed that it was Kent who did it, and their dad was the one to confront Kent about it when he returned. Kent admitted that it was him. His dad didn't want to press charges though, but he also knew like this is not something that is going to be just swept under the rug and we're going to forget about it. So he had Kent sign an agreement that he was going to remove himself from the family business and that he was not entitled to any of the shares of the business. And at that point, I think when he had signed off on this, it was around like $100,000 that he agreed like he was not going to get. So he left Michigan at this point, and he left to find himself, step away from the family business. And obviously there was a lot of contention within the family, and he just kind of wanted to get away from that. So he moved to Tennessee, where he learned to do taxidermy, and he was there for about 3 years. During those 3 years, his family said that he was doing really well. His parents particularly were working really hard to kind of mend the strained relationships, not just between them. It had gotten to a pretty decent point, but also with their other sons so that the brothers could kind of get back to where they were. Things were moving slowly in that department, but his parents were still forging forward, and they were going to go on a trip to Reno. And so they had invited Kent to go with them. So it was just the 3 of them. They went to Reno, and while they were there, they met this fisherman who worked up in Alaska. He and Kent immediately hit it off. This was right up Kent's alley. He loved anything to do with outdoors, hunting, fishing. So to have a career being like an outdoorsy guy, particularly fishing, he was all over this. So he went with this guy. This guy brought him up to Alaska, took him under his reins, and even nicknamed him TT, which pretty much everybody in Alaska knew him as. He wasn't referred to as Kent out there. It was TT, and it stood for Tennessee Taxidermist. Not long after he moved up to Alaska, his parents came out to visit him there as well. And they just said that it was like the first time they really saw Kent like come into his own. This was totally his element, doing something career-wise that he used to have as a hobby. But it was clear that as happy as he was career-wise, there were, some things missing in the companionship department. So Kent did what a lot of single guys did to try to fill that void. And up in Alaska, there was a pretty popular dancing club called the Alaskan Bush Company. So it was a topless bar, and that's where a lot of single dudes went and hung out after work. And Kent did the same. And there he connected with she was relatively new dancer, but very popular. Her name was Michelle Hughes. Michelle is described as having the it factor. She made every single person that she came in contact with at the club feel like they were the only person in that room. her dance or stage name was Bobby Joe, and Bobby Joe was killing it. She was said to be making anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a night. And you have to remember, like, this is in the early 90s. Like, she was making money. She said the appeal there was that she could make really good money. She wanted to save up for school. And once she had saved up a bunch of money, she was going to leave, start her career, build up a family. That was always the main goal. She also wasn't from Alaska, though. She was born in Louisiana. She was the youngest of 3 daughters and born in a military family, so used to moving from place to place. Her family said that even though she was the youngest of 3 girls, it didn't hold her back. She was very capable of holding her own. She did have a soft spot for animals, though, and her mom said that she was the kid who would just randomly show up at home with stray animals. Unfortunately, her dad died not long after her 12th birthday, and it made her kind of focus on wanting to take care of herself and just be very reliant on herself. She left home as a teen and she headed to New York with her sights on making it as a model. That plan didn't really take off like Michelle had expected it to, and so she just kept forging forward, made it all the way to Alaska when a friend of hers that she met said there was a lot of money to be made out there. Initially, the goal was for her to go to veterinary school. That wasn't a surprise to anybody who knew her because of how much she loved animals. And her coworkers were really impressed with her work ethic because they could tell like she had a goal in mind and like she was just laser focused on that. She wasn't a partier. She didn't go out after work. She never caused any issues. She just went, did her job, saved her money, and went home. So she was only working at the Alaskan Bush Company for a couple months when Kent came in that one day. And Kent saw her and fell very hard, like head over heels. He told his friends and family, like the next day, I've met the woman I'm going to marry. In fact, he proposed to her a month after meeting. This relationship is super complicated because Kent was very open with his feelings to Michelle, and there's always 2 sides to every story. So in Michelle's eyes, she had said that she made it very clear that there wasn't really going to be a future there. Those who worked with her and knew her kind of just excused it off as like this was just part of the job. Everyone always felt like they were Michelle's boyfriend or gonna marry Michelle, and that he just kind of took it too far. But the more you learn about the relationship, you can see that Kent wasn't completely delusional to believe this from Michelle, and that he didn't just like propose to her and then only went and visited her at work and stuff like that. There was a relationship there. So he was telling his family a lot about Michelle, and about 9 months after he had told them that he proposed to her, his parents had come out to visit Kent and meet her. And their impression was that they had this person just so built up and this relationship so built up in their head coming from Kent, and they were really underwhelmed. She was a knockout, just gorgeous on the outside, but they could just tell that she was not into Kent. They said when he would do things like put his arm around her and get close to her, she would pull away or just like get really tense. And it was like they could just read on her face through her body language that she was just grin and bearing it. His parents distinctly remember an incident on that first meeting where they were at dinner and Kent pulls out this diamond pendant. And she kind of looks at it and she's like, oh, no, it's okay. I already have one, which is a really big flag. Like, who cares if you have 10? Who cares if you're actually not really that into it in that moment in front of his family? Maybe just be like, oh, thank you so much. And then maybe in private, be like, hey, babe, like kind of not my style. I don't want the money to go to waste. Do you think that we could go together and pick something out together? I don't know. Or you just keep it and you just wear it because you're just that type of person. I don't know. But to sit there, I couldn't imagine just like sitting there in front of somebody's parents and being like, no, I already have one. Another red flag that came about for his family was when he was talking to his brother about this upcoming marriage, this engagement, and he made a point to say that the ring that Michelle was wearing was just a placeholder because Michelle wasn't into small diamonds and it had to be a lot larger. Now, something Kent didn't know was that he was not just competing for Michelle's approval in the ring department. He wasn't the only one trying to lock her down, period, or in the running to do so. 10 days after Kent's proposal, a successful traveling salesman who had also been seeing Michelle named Scott Hilke also proposed to Michelle, and she said yes too. Now, what happened with Scott was he ended up at the Alaskan Bush Company when there was like a mix-up in his schedule. It was his first time going out to Alaska. He was sent there from the company that he worked for to do some training up there. And he was actually sent out 2 weeks earlier than he was supposed to be. So he had 2 weeks to kill before this training. And so he was venturing out around town and came across this dance club. Like so many of the other guys that would go in there and see Michelle, he fell for her very hard. But people who knew her, people that worked with her, said she also fell for Scott. So she would openly talk about them being in a relationship, and he would travel back and forth to visit her in Alaska. They also did a lot of traveling together around the world. And so her friends at work that knew her said when he proposed, they weren't surprised that she accepted. But wait, there is more.
But wait, there's more.
John Carlin, a gentleman whose wife had recently passed away from cancer, who had a teenage son living out in Alaska, also met Michelle at the club, also fell in love with Michelle, also proposed, and she also accepted. So that was 3 fiancés who all believed they were the only fiancés in an 18-month period. Now, the difference between John and the other men is John found out about the other guys, but he was just so in love with her, he didn't care. And she had a really good way of making him feel like he was like her comfort, not necessarily like he was the only one for her, but that she just needed him. She relied on him. And I think a large part of that was because he had recently won a lawsuit and gained over $800,000, and he loved to spend it on Michelle. So I think he just thought, if I stick this through, eventually, I'm going to be the last guy standing. She's like the original bachelorette is what it sounds like she was trying to go for here. And John didn't have to wait long for one guy to bow out. Scott Hilke had made it very clear to Michelle when they first got engaged that he didn't want a long engagement. He wanted to be married to her within a year. He was quite a bit older than her, so ready to settle down, ready for her to stop dancing and move on with, the next phase of her life, her going to school, etc. He even had left his rather successful sales position to move out there to Alaska to be closer to her and to try to start up his own company. Scott said it got to the point where he was realizing like this wedding is not going to happen, not only just because she kept pushing it back, but for quite a while, she was trying to play it off like John and Kent were just clients. And yeah, like sometimes they would hang out at work, even though that was like a pretty big faux pas and not a lot of people would be down with that. But then he would see, okay, like they're coming around a lot more. Like this is not just like a client relationship. And then I think one of the last straws was when she asked Scott to stay home and watch their animals for her while she went on a European vacation with John. And she said that like she was just going as like a friend for 2 weeks. On top of that, Kent was showing up like everywhere they went. So he realized he was never going to have this relationship with her where it was just going to be the two of them. And he was like, peace out, Michelle. So that left Kent and John, which got even more complicated, even though, you've lost one fiance. No, things got worse. Now, Kent was still in full-blown wedding planning mode. And even though the first time that his parents came out and met Michelle and weren't like overly impressed, they still wanted Kent to be happy and they wanted this to work out for his sake. So they were trying their best to reach out and get involved in as much of the planning as they could without stepping on toes, just to let them know, like, hey, we're here, we support this, what can we do? But they weren't getting like clear direction on anything, and especially not dates, which is like the main thing you kind of want to hammer down. All Kent kept saying was that he wanted to get married by the end of April, and that was like approaching as like weeks away. And when they'd ask, okay, is that the plan, or like, have we now moved on to next April? Because it takes a lot of time to plan a wedding, Ken. He was like, no, like we're still going. Yeah, I'm gonna get a date locked in with Michelle. I'll let you know. The next time they talk to him about the wedding, he's just like heartbroken. He doesn't have a date, and he's like, I actually don't even know where Michelle is. She's disappeared on me again, and I can't track her down. So his parents were like, this is not a good situation. Obviously, there's something going on here. And I think for Kent, it sounds like he was very manipulated into, and maybe like let's use the term gaslit. I know that it gets like tossed around too much, but it kind of sounds like that is what was going on, where he was concerned about other men that were in Michelle's life, and she would just say things like, oh, that's like a big brother to me, or that's like a father figure to me, like you have nothing to worry about, you're being insecure, you're acting crazy, do I really want to do this, like you don't even trust me. So that was kind of like the vibe that I was getting from him, still believing her and still pushing forward when she would be out with these other people, and then vice versa with the other men. Like she was always kind of pitting them together so they wouldn't really talk amongst themselves about everything, and she would just like bully them into not trust, or into trusting her and acting like they were the crazy ones for not believing her. So his parents were like, regardless of what happens right now, it doesn't sound like the wedding's going to go down, and it sounds like you just need to get a break. So they flew him out to Michigan to kind of reset. It sounds like that did not work, though. His parents said that the whole time he was just consumed on his laptop, sending out emails to Michelle that she was not replying back to, just desperate to get in touch with her. I guess finally his mom sent an email to her and was just basically like, hey, Michelle, just, want to let you know that we're thinking about you. We wish you could have made it down for the trip to have a little visit. We'd really love to still lock down some plans for the wedding and help in any way we could. And even though Michelle hadn't been responding to Kent, she replied back to his mom and was like, yeah, I really missed you guys too. Thanks for reaching out. Really wish we could lock some dates in as well. But then said it was just like too much of an offer, too much to ask for. And she felt like with the new fishing season ahead of them, she thought that maybe they could wait until the fall when Kent was done being so busy with work. So it's his mom who's telling him like, this is where Michelle's thoughts are at, and he's just devastated. He wants to still like get married ASAP, but his family is like, I think that is, she's onto something. I think it's actually a good idea. In the back of their mind, they're actually hoping that by the time the fall rolls around, he'll just be over it and the relationship will be done. They said, though, no matter what they said, Kent was adamant. Like he wanted to marry Michelle. It didn't have to be like a big elaborate wedding. He would do whatever she wanted to, but even if that kind of happened later on down the road, he wanted it to make it official. And maybe he wanted to do that just because he thought once, there was a label on it, all of these other problems that they had would kind of go away, which, I mean, just in reality, that's usually not the case. So your problems are always going to catch up to you. So Kent flew back to Anchorage with the hope that he could get like a more solid plan from Michelle. Not long after, his dad also flew out, and he was there to help Kent kind of get his fishing business up and running. By this point, Kent was wanting to kind of go out and do a season on his own and start his own business with the support of his dad. And his dad said that the whole time he was there, Michelle was MIA. Now, this is where things get complicated in the living situation and like the whole Michelle, John, Kent situation. So Michelle had purchased a property out in Anchorage, and she was wanting to do like a little bit of remodeling. But as she was starting, her contractor noticed that there was like a lot of mold issues that needed to get repaired before they started any type of remodeling. And so her and Kent were pretty much living together at her house. And while this remodel or this whole like repair, it turned pretty much into like almost like a tear down at that point, they couldn't be living in the house. So Michelle went to go live with John temporarily and his son. And then when Kent wasn't out working on the boat, sleeping on the boat, he also was staying at John's house. So when Kent's dad was down there trying to get him all set up with his new venture, he asked his dad, like, do you want to stay at John's place? And he was like, this just is screaming so many red flags. This doesn't sound right. No, I'm actually going to get a hotel. And he was hoping that like the more time he spent with his son, like he could just keep reiterating to him, like, this does not seem like a good situation, son. I don't think that you should be involved with this person. He said nothing seemed to get through to his son though, and he left there feeling very helpless when he flew back home to Michigan. What he didn't know was the evening that he flew back, Kent had sent a package in the mail to his parents. The package arrived May 3rd, 1996, and it came in like a package with a bunch of documents in it and a letter, and then there was a second letter that was sealed. So his parents are going through it and they read the first this first letter that they see that's out in the open, and it's rather cryptic. I'll read it to you. It said, "Thanks for coming up. Sorry Michelle couldn't be here to see you. Please put the enclosed envelope in your safety deposit box. Do not open it. I talked to you about insurance policies. This is mine. If I didn't think that things could get a little rough up here, I wouldn't have sent you this. It'll be safer there. It's not funny to talk about getting killed, but in today's world, you have to expect anything. Don't get all nervous and call me on the phone about this." Okay, Al and I talked lightly about this. So he had addressed this letter to his mom and father, and his father's initials were KL, and that's who he's referring to. "If you think anything fishy has happened to me, then you can open the other envelope I've sent. It's pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to worry about me. I'll be okay. Just want to make sure all my ducks are in a row. By the time you get this, I'll have called you. The phone call will explain everything. Love, Kent." So obviously his parents are like, what the heck does this mean? They call him for clarification because they hadn't talked to him yet and there's no answer. So they respected his wishes and they didn't open up that other envelope until they had clarification from him, which unfortunately never came. Later that day, Kent was found dead in a very isolated area up in Hope, Alaska, which was about 90 miles south of where he was living in Anchorage. Kent was found by a stranger to him. It was an electrician who was just doing meter readings around town. And he at first had noticed Kent's red jacket. He thought that it was maybe somebody's equipment, somebody else who was doing work up there because this area was so isolated. And then as he got up closer, he realized it was a body. Kent was found, he was on his back, but his legs were extended out but kind of crossed. So it was like he was about to turn around, but then was shot. He was shot 3 times, and the biggest clue was the shell casings that were found around him. There was a shell casing for a .44, and it belonged to like a specific gun, which is called a Desert Eagle. I don't know anything about guns, so I'm talking out of my ass right now. One of the investigators, though, was familiar with this, so he knew that this was like a very specific gun, and it was like a heavy sucker. Like it had some jam to it. There was lots going on with Kent's body, with the condition that he was found, that was quite helpful to the investigation. First, even though he was in the middle of nowhere and there was wildlife known to be around, he was perfectly preserved. The ground was still quite frozen, so it was, kind of keeping his body cool. And at the point that he was found, there was no bugs or insects or anything that had discovered him yet. And based on the rigor mortis of his body, investigators believed he had been there for maybe about 12 to 24 hours. The medical examiner felt like whoever had done this to Kent was pretty close to him in several senses, close in distance. So he would have believed that he was also close to him personally based on the location that he was found. But he knew that this person who shot him was close because there was stippling on his skin from the gunshot wounds. So that usually happens like from the spray of the bullet from the gun, and you need to be at a rather close distance for that to happen. There was also no sign of any defensive wounds or any indication that he was kidnapped, tied up, dragged, or taken out there, so he trusted whoever it was to walk to this closed off area. Going through his pockets in his pants and his jackets, they found his wallet, so they were able to identify Kent. And they also found some papers like stuffed in his pockets and a checkbook that had Kent's name on it and Michelle Hughes's name on it with an address. And this address on there is not anywhere near Hope. It's in Anchorage. In his other pocket, they found this folded up sheet of paper, which turned out to be a change of beneficiary form for a life insurance policy, saying that Kent Leppink wanted his sole beneficiary to be his father, followed by his mother, followed by one of his brothers. I mean, I can only imagine just how confusing that is for a detective just coming across somebody's body. You've got all of this, like these ominous clues and stuff, but have no idea who these people are, why he's there, and like why he's just walking around with a change of beneficiary form on him. So they go to the address that is on the checkbook. It's over 3 hours away from where Kent was found. The address is actually in Wasilla. And when they get to the house, they arrive and there's 3 people that are outside. And they learn that these 3 people are Michelle, John Carlin, and John Carlin's son. And they're outside the house, kind of looking through the shed where there was a bunch of Kent's belongings. This turned out to be the house that Michelle had purchased, that she was doing renos for, and then had to move out to Anchorage to live with John, with Kent and John's son while that was getting done. So this was Michelle's house. When investigators get there, they ask who she is. She says her name is Michelle Hughes. That matches the name that's on the checkbook, but they're not really feeding her anything. They just said they're there to find out information about Kent Leppink. And she asked, the normal questions like, is he okay? Is he in any trouble? And they just kind of bypass it. She tells them, yes, she knows Kent. They're engaged, but they have a very complicated relationship. And she says that she also has a boyfriend named Scott Hilke. She happens to mention that her and Scott were just on this little getaway in Lake Tahoe and that she had just gotten back home, which would have been the day that Kent was found. They're kind of asking like, okay, like how is the relationship complicated in your perspective? And she said that they've told his family that they're getting married, but they didn't really have plans on getting married and that there wasn't a date set, and kind of alluded to the fact that Kent was interested in men. She again asks if he's okay, and the detectives are like, you know what? No, he's actually dead. And that's pretty much all we're going to say. John's there. He's like, you can come back to my place if you'd like. That's where Kent has also been staying. So there are some of his items there if you want to look through them. And his truck happens to be at John's house as well, which is also concerning because he's 90 miles away when his body is found and there's no vehicle in sight. When they get to John's house, they go through Kent's vehicle and they find another interesting piece of paper. This is one that kind of explains why he may have been out in Hope in the first place, since nobody knew why he would be there. He didn't have any family in Alaska or friends. He'd only been there to do work like within the past few years and didn't know anybody in Hope. So they find this note. It's typed out at first, and then you can see that there's like handwriting on the side. So the first portion that's typed out seems to be directed to Michelle, and it basically says, hey, you know that property out in Hope that I purchased for you? Well, it's all fixed up. The roof is like all new. It's all good to go. Enjoy yourselves. Have a good weekend. And I won't let anyone know where you are. And then it's signed from John Carlin. And then underneath that portion, it's like a handwritten area. And this looks like Michelle's handwriting. And she says, thank you so much. It's going to be so nice to go and get away. And then just clarifies, please don't let anybody know where we are going to be. And then it says, love, Michelle. Lots of ominous notes and documents going on here. It seems like, just like at face value, that Michelle was going out to Hope to meet somebody, and if this was her fiance and she's talking about this with like her and John, even though they didn't say don't tell Kent where we're going to be, if that's where Kent was found, it's believed that it was intended for him to find. And it was also in his truck. At this point, Kent's family hadn't been notified yet. So they're the next to be informed what happened with Kent. And immediately they tell investigators about this letter that they just received. They open up the second envelope, and inside there's another letter as well as a copy of that change of beneficiary form that investigators had found on Kent when he was found. In the second letter, Kent just starts off with, if you're reading this, you assume that I'm dead. He goes on to say, don't dwell on that. It was my time, and there is nothing that can change that. There are a few things I would like you to do for me, though. I hate to be vindictive in my death, but paybacks are hell. He goes on to ask his parents to pay off all of his debts, use the life insurance money that he had assigned to them to do that. He said that he wanted his fishing boat to go to a friend of his, and then he wanted them to go on a nice vacation and not like mourn him. He said to act like you would, like I was there, and do the things that we would all do together. He then said, use the information enclosed to take Michelle down. Make sure she is prosecuted. Michelle, John, or Scott were the people or persons that probably killed me. Make sure they get burned. He then says sorry to his parents for like being this heavy and asking them to do this. And he says, I had every intention of marrying Michelle. I wish like it didn't come to this. And then he said, but if I'm not here, please make sure that she goes to jail for a really long time. He also added there though, that he wanted them to go and visit her in jail and let her know that like he really truly loved her. He goes on to say that she has a split personality, and the part I fell in love with is very beautiful. I really did want to marry her and make all of her dreams come true. He signed it and ended it there with love ya, Kent. So very interesting way, I'm sure, to start an investigation, and then narrowing down the suspects was rather interesting. So Scott, remember, had called things off with Michelle in terms of an engagement, but they were keeping in touch. They were reconnecting sometimes, and she and him had recently planned a trip to go and see each other and stay in a hotel in Lake Tahoe. This happened to be when Kent was killed. And so the two of them were 1,000 miles away when this happened. Scott was looked at as a suspect primarily because of his relationship with Michelle and how complicated the whole situation was, but there really wasn't any motive or anything that investigators could tie to him, so he was cleared pretty early on. Just to mention, there was a lie detector test that was given and he didn't pass it, but the questions were like if he was the one who had like made the shot and was there and had done this, and it was obvious that he wasn't the one who had actually done that, and people fail polygraphs all the time. So just like coupled with that, when they knew that there was evidence that he wasn't anywhere close, he was cleared. Plus, he was the one to end things with Michelle. He wasn't, it seemed, concerned with any form of competition, like wanting to eliminate Kent because of this engagement or anything, because in his mind, he wasn't even really aware of the extent of the relationship between Kent and Michelle. he just kind of believed Michelle when she said that he was kind of a bother and wouldn't really leave her alone. Investigators felt like it was Michelle that seemed to have quite a few reasons to get rid of Kent. They felt like a million reasons because she had actually purchased a pre-wedding present that she paid for, which was a $1 million life insurance policy on Kent, with her being the beneficiary. This was something that Kent was aware about. He even did share it with his family, although when he spoke about it with his family, he told them that it was a gift from her grandfather and that her grandfather just felt like this was the right thing to do if they were going to be getting married, just to have, protection for her. And obviously his parents were like, no, people do not just buy $1 million life insurance policies as wedding gifts. But, we kind of heard about it earlier on. He very much had his sights set on Michelle and his mind made up on wanting to marry her, and basically said to his family, I'm going to be okay and I'm a big boy. We realize based on the letters to his family and the change of beneficiary quickly before his death, there was a shift in his mind where maybe he was getting ready to just finally call it quits. He was concerned enough though about his life that he changed Michelle off of the beneficiary, and it didn't seem like she knew about that, because when investigators asked if there was any type of motive that anybody would have, she brought up that there was a life insurance policy and that she was the beneficiary. The problem with looking at Michelle is that we know she was with Scott. So who killed Kent if she was in Lake Tahoe? Investigators really believed that that note that they found in Kent's truck was basically the missing piece of the puzzle. They felt like it was kind of a ruse, this was left out intentionally. It was completely fabricated between John and Michelle to insinuate that that's where Michelle was going to be, that she was going to be with somebody, and they knew that Kent would go out there looking for her. The letter also alludes to John purchasing a property for Michelle. And this is where things get confusing, because Kent did go out there. He gets the letter, goes out to Hope. Witnesses from shops remember speaking to him. He showed them photos of Michelle, asked if they had seen her. She said no. And then he was asking about, property that was recently sold and purchased. And this is, from my understanding, a very, very small town where people kind of know these things, and nothing was ringing a bell. John's name wasn't ringing a bell, Michelle's wasn't, and it didn't seem like there was actually any property. So Kent had actually left Hope and went back home. It was a few days later that something made him go back, and nobody knows why he went back or how he got there, because his car was still left in Anchorage. But this is when he goes back out a second time and then is found dead. Now, just because there's a lot of red flags and arrows pointing to certain suspects, there's just way too many questions to lay any charges. So not long after Kent was killed, Michelle and John went on their separate ways. They left Alaska. He went to New Jersey, and Michelle made her way to Olympia, Washington to live a very suburban lifestyle. She married a doctor named Colin Linehan. When they met, he was not a doctor yet, so it's not like she was like, oh, I met a doctor, I'm gonna marry a doctor. They met while they were jogging their dogs, struck up a conversation. The rest is history. Funny enough, though, he was from Anchorage and he had moved to Olympia with his family when he was 8. Anyways, they quickly started dating, and then they actually married the day after he graduated from med school. 2 years after they got married, they had a little baby girl, and her family and friends said that she was very supportive of her husband while he was getting his practice going. When you graduate from med school, you don't just go into practice and then all of a sudden you're just this well-off doctor and everything falls into place and you've got all these patients. It takes a lot of work. Plus, you've got a crap ton of student loan debts most of the time. So she kind of supported him while he got all of that going and put her studying and interests to the side. After they were feeling like he was pretty established, she ended up getting her master's degree in public administration. She also volunteered at the Red Cross teaching CPR training, and she joined the PTA at her daughter's school. And I think if you could picture like the quintessential PTA neighborhood, all the kids want to hang out at your house, mom. That's how Michelle is described within her community. She was a favorite among all of the other moms. At the school, she was loved. She was volunteering and available. And in her neighborhood as well, it sounded like one of those neighborhoods that you just like had block parties and stuff all the time. She said that they hosted pizza night where the neighbors would come over with their kids and make homemade pizzas and get all messy and loud, and just a very different life than the one she left behind in Alaska. John also remarried, and it seemed like they were kind of like just going on living life as if Kent's death was behind them. And then 9 years after Kent's murder, a detective comes and knocks on their door. This new detective had taken on the case and was just trying to drum up some new evidence, and had actually spoken to somebody that detectives wanted to years earlier but were denied any access to. And that was John Carlin's son, who was 17 years old at the time, but now was 26. He was kind of reluctant, but agreed to talk, and throughout that interview, he says that he knew that his dad owned a Desert Eagle. He didn't just know that he had this gun, he knew that he had purchased it in a classifieds ad in the newspaper, and the detective was actually able to track down this ad and was still able to get a hold of the seller. And this seller was able to confirm that John was the buyer. When he was asked if he ever saw anything suspicious that that was surrounding the gun, he did say that he believed it was days after Kent was found. He had come home from being out, and the look on his dad and Michelle's face was kind of like they weren't really expecting him back. They were standing in the bathroom, and he walked over and he saw that his dad was cleaning this gun in the sink in the bathroom, and that he could smell some sort of chemical that he described as the closest thing that he could think of would be like bleach. He doesn't say that he thinks his dad is capable of doing anything though. Like he's just like, this is the information. I don't know what this means. And he kind of even insinuated that he knew his dad was such a good guy and really cared for Michelle, that maybe his dad was helping clean up a mess that somebody who has not yet been interviewed or spoken to could be connected to the case and was wanting to help Michelle. And he was just trying to clean up the situation for them. So when the detective knocks on Michelle's door, she's just kind of like, hey, I'm here to clarify some statements that you made in regards to Kent Leppink's murder and ask you some questions about some new information that's come up from John's son. And she also wanted to talk about a laptop that had been in evidence this whole time. This laptop actually was a laptop that Michelle and Kent shared, but Michelle had left it with her sister and asked her sister to completely wipe it, and her sister just felt really uneasy about it. And when she did express concern to Michelle, like, why am I going to wipe it? Like, I don't think we should do that. Michelle got really defensive and said, well, I don't know why, why you're so concerned about this investigation, and referred to Kent as an animal torturer because he did taxidermy, and that no one in Alaska was mad that he was dead, and that he should have been tortured too because of what he did to these animals. Which is kind of hypocritical because she was getting all of these gifts from all of these guys, and one of the things that she really liked to get was furs. So it's like, what in the PETA is going on here? Like, you can't have it both ways, girl. So anyways, they had this laptop this whole time, but at the time that they had it, they really didn't have the technology to look into it because it had been wiped out. But now with the advancements in technology, they were able to retrieve some emails between Michelle and the men in her life. And this is kind of where they get a good inside look about how all of the dynamics were going on. And it was like Michelle was just stringing everybody along, and any type of concern that they had, she had an answer for it. It was, oh, John is like a dad to me, like, don't worry about him. And with Kent, she very much led him on. She was always referring to their engagement. You could tell where the arguments were kind of coming in terms of like dates and locking things down. She did a very good job at making Kent feel like the issues and the reason why there were dates being set was because of him upsetting her. And then when he would pull away a little bit, you could see that she would kind of reel him back in by emailing him things like, well, I really did want to get married to you, and if that's still an option, let's just do it right now. Let's not think about it. Let's get it done. And how confusing would that be? So it kind of brings you to those moments where Kent's family is having like a better understanding behind the scenes, because they're not understanding where they'll make a little bit of progress to allow him to see, this doesn't really make sense, get him to kind of leave the situation for a short little bit of time, but then she's like right there to reel him back in. Now, this is not like overly incriminating, but it's a really good indication of how manipulative she can be and how deceitful she was to the men, particularly Kent. I really, really felt for Kent in when the emails were described, because she belittled Kent to Kent, but she also did to the other men, which I think deterred them a lot from talking to him, because she just kind of painted this picture as like he was so annoying and like she couldn't shake him. But when she would email Kent, it was always for like some form of gain. She was going through those renovations and stuff, so she was always asking Kent for money to pitch in with the renovations. He was actually having to take out loans and saying to his family that it was for his fishing business. But through the emails, we know so much of it went to Michelle. And in the end of the email, she would sign it, your future wife, just to keep the hooks in. In John's emails, it was very clear that he would do anything for Michelle. Quote one of the emails from him, "I don't desire anyone but you, and I will worship the ground you walk on, the air you breathe, the words you speak, and the glow of your being." Again, nothing in here is talking or pointing to murder, but there were some emails that there were a little bit incriminating. They needed some clarification on them, and they wanted to talk to John and Michelle about them. One of them, John says, "I will be the one who will take the loss. You have asked me several times to tell you what to do and that you're going to be okay. I will do this. You will be just fine, Michelle. Just give it a few weeks. Your life is about to get a lot better. The ball is in your court. You are making the decisions, not me. You will decide what will happen." This was sent on April 24th, and it was 8 days later that Kent was found. Now, the next suspicious email is the email that investigators called the Seychelles email. And Michelle had sent an email to John 2 days prior to Kent being found, and it said, "I can't wait for our getaway. Did you know that you can buy citizenships to Seychelles for $10 million? And no matter what crimes you have committed, they will not extradite." Very interesting. I don't know who just like types this information the day before the man you took $1 million life insurance policy out on dies. Again, though, not direct evidence, because $1 million and $10 million is like a big difference. what the investigators really, really were pushing for was trying to locate this desert eagle. They had the shell casings, but just to make the case stronger, that's what they were looking for. And it was something that John, Michelle, and Scott were all interviewed about, and all of them denied ever owning a desert eagle, although Michelle did mention that she believed that was the make and model of a gun that Kent once owned. Despite their best efforts, they were not able to track down a gun, and it took them a year to put a case together. So that's 10 years after Kent's murder. Michelle and John were indicted on first-degree murder charges for killing Kent Leppink and brought back to Alaska for trial. They were tried separately. In John's trial, they paint him as being a puppet. In Michelle's show, they say that she basically just used everybody, specifically John, because of how much he cared for her, and that he was kind of set up to look like a scapegoat in this murder and take the fall for her. They even suggested that John's son could possibly have been the killer and been manipulated by Michelle as well. But one of the main focuses for John's trial from the prosecutors was that this note about a property out in Hope and Michelle being out there and being with somebody and her and John keeping it a secret showed intention to lure Kent out there, and that John was aware of this. Now, John did admit that he wrote this note with Michelle, that it was all a ruse, but it was only so that it gave Michelle a chance to go away to Lake Tahoe with Scott and not be followed by Kent. The argument of, okay, well, if you were also like engaged to her and in love with her and the plan was for the two of you to always end up together, like why would you do this? And it was basically that he was just blinded by his love for her and he would have done anything for her, even if that meant like letting her go and have a getaway with somebody else and just staying at home, hoping that she wouldn't have the best time and come back to him. They also were able to bring up the Seychelles email that Michelle sent about not being able to be extradited for no matter what crime you had. And John's son also was called to testify, and he reluctantly did. And I really felt for him because I do think that he felt like his dad was innocent and was truly trying to help Michelle cover up whatever she had gotten herself into. And he also shared that was a struggle because he was particularly close with Michelle as well. He looked at her as a big sister, even kind of like a mom figure, because he didn't have his mom anymore. And he said like she was the one who encouraged him to get counseling when he was going through a really rough time. And she was always the one that helped diffuse arguments in the house between John Jr. and John Sr. So I can't imagine how confusing and kind of probably torturous to you that would have felt, because you're wanting to share information, but also knowing how that information is possibly going to perceived, even if you're seeing like a different side of it. And I don't think that he was expecting for his father to ultimately be found guilty and sentenced to 99 years in prison. During Michelle's trial, the defense played it off like all of these men, except for Scott Hilke, were delusional and that there was never, ever going to be a wedding between her and Kent. I mean, the emails said otherwise, or at least even if she felt that in her heart that they were never going to get married, that's not what she was saying to Kent. She said the only reason why she allowed Kent to tell other people that they were engaged is because she was helping him cover for his sexuality. She said that he was gay and she was his cover. If she was engaged to him, then his family and friends wouldn't be upset. And listen, I understand this is in the 90s. I think we were like starting to evolve a little bit into acceptance and understanding, but I know that was not like where it is today. But all of her actions just didn't seem like one of like a friend who was trying to just help out their friend and cover for them. Like, why would she be planting these notes to find that she was off with somebody else, having these secret rendezvous. Like, wouldn't you be helping your gay friend have the secret rendezvous? And, so that no one would find them? And her defense also pointed the finger at John, saying that he saw Kent as his rival. Apparently, even though they were close and living together, he didn't know about him being gay. And then they said he, to get rid of him, he took him to Hope and killed him. And again, so contradictory, because why would Michelle handwrite on that note, like, thank you, please don't let anybody know where we are, if she didn't know that John was going to go do this? Let's remind ourselves, it was Michelle who had taken out the $1 million life insurance policy on Kent, not John, and didn't know that she had been removed until after he died. And also, why would she send emails to Kent about getting married? You know what I mean? Like, okay, and like, let's do this right away and sign your future wife and bring him back like after an argument. If these were just conversations between the two of them, it's not like she was CCing his family, and having them involved in this fake relationship. Like, she was messaging Kent. For the record, Kent's family had said, if he were gay, it would have made no difference to them. They love him regardless. And I do believe that. I mean, if you think about, your son or daughter kind of just like veering off and stealing $200,000 from your family business, and you being able to find a way to rectify the situation and constantly still be in their life and trying to like repair other relationships within the family, I don't know. They seem like very understanding, loving people. And they did not believe that he was gay at all, because just based on like the interaction that they themselves saw between Michelle and Kent, where they saw the way that he looked at her, and they had never seen him look like at somebody like that before, and how desperate he was to want to be with her, and brokenhearted every time that she wouldn't want to set a date. Now, Michelle didn't take the stand in her trial, but her new husband, they had been married for quite some time at this point, but her husband, Colin, did. And he was basically a character witness, just to say how frustrating it was to see his wife be portrayed the way that she was. She was painted as this money-hungry, devious dancer who murdered somebody, and that's not who he knew, like his whole entire time of knowing Michelle. She was the one who sacrificed her career to lift him up and raise their daughter and be the one at schools all the time and organizing neighborhood events. And it just was a very far cry from a murderer. Now, I felt for him, because it almost, I don't know what good it did for her. I felt like it kind of made it look like she was just really good at making these men see like the type of person that she wanted them to see. And Scott Hilke was actually called to testify, and under oath, he also spoke of her character, his as well, and had to like throw himself under the bus, because he testified that while Michelle's husband was in Afghanistan doing a tour as a doctor out there for a year, he and Michelle had reconnected, and Scott was also remarried at the time, and they met up in a hotel. And I'm sure you know what happened. Not only that, but he said that their daughter was there. And when the daughter went to bed, they, which really would have just like jabbed that knife in just a little bit harder if I was her husband. When it came time for the verdict, though, it seemed like Colin was just willing to stand by his woman. He was actually allowed to stand beside her while the verdict was read. And despite not really having any direct evidence, no DNA, no ties to Michelle being the one who purchased a gun, and that she was 1,000 miles away when Kent was killed, she was also found guilty and sentenced to 99 years in prison. Now, if you're feeling like, oh yeah, all of this is, lining up, the circumstantial evidence is good, and John and Michelle are exactly where they need to be, hold on. If you're feeling like that was not enough and they probably should have been found not guilty, also hold on. Now, John was killed by another prison inmate in 2008. And since John's case was on appeal at the time, his case was completely thrown out, which completely flipped Michelle's case all around. Her lawyer had also been in appeals for 2 years after her sentence, and they were able to reverse her conviction. And the reasons were a lot to do with these letters. One of them being the one that Kent wrote to his parents. They were saying that that should have never been admissible in court. And same with another witness that had taken the stand against Michelle. It was a former friend of hers in Alaska, and she had mentioned a movie that she said Michelle was obsessed with. And this movie, it was called The Last Seductress. And basically this girl is married, has a boyfriend, convinces the boyfriend to kill the husband. He does. The boyfriend goes to jail, and then she walks off with like a boatload of money. And this friend said that this is who Michelle used to idolize. And I actually don't disagree that this should not have been mentioned at all in court. This friend was very into movies. She took movie loving to like a whole new level. She would actually write down in a journal what movie she watched, who she watched it with, on what day, and if she didn't like finish the movie, she would say like watched half of American Pie or whatever. So she did record in her journal that she did watch this movie. She says that she watched it in September 1995, according to her records, but she watched it with her husband and not Michelle. So because of this, the judge felt like there was an argument for at least a retrial. So she was released, but then the judge also made a statement that he felt that her whole case was based around John Carlin also being involved. And since there was now no case against John Carlin because it was just completely thrown out since it was on appeal, there was nothing against Michelle now. Given that John is not here and his name is not allowed to be mentioned to a jury, even the fact that he was convicted and on appeal at the time of his death, that's not allowed to be mentioned. So basically the prosecutors felt like there was virtually no case because Michelle was not near the scene of the crime when it happened. And then if you can't kind of put your suspicions on how Kent got there and who would have driven him there and did it for her, there's really no case. And so they dismissed her indictment and she's out. She's free. So yeah, I don't know where I was when that update had happened. She has been out for a very long time, just living her life. And yeah, I've always just thought about the case and Kent, and I've not thought about it as like a slam dunk case. I thought about it and had my opinions about like the circumstantial evidence like being pretty telling, but I didn't think that it was enough. But then when I found out that there's just like nobody charged with Kent's murder, I was just like, oh, okay, well now, like I honestly truly believe that nothing will ever come, especially now that John's dead, because that would have, I think, probably been the best bet for a case to say like, oh, okay, well she was gone, but this guy was here and Kent was living at his house and his truck was at his house. So yeah. I don't know. This is where we're at, you guys. I've been all over the place. I'm really, really, really curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. Not just like in an emotional standpoint, because I get super emotional about it. And I'm like, no, that's not fair. They should be in jail. But then when I'm thinking about it in terms of the law, yeah. What do you think? Do you also agree that this was maybe not enough for a strong case, especially if they were like in that appeal process? Do you know what I mean? Prior to John even dying, like they had already got there, which is not always the easiest thing to do. Yeah. But then also I don't know what would have really made things different. I don't know. I'm all over the place. Please talk me off the ledge here, you guys. I want to know your guys' thoughts. That is it for me today. If you have not already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. The answer to today's riddle, quick refresher. What do you buy to eat but never consume? And the answer is cutlery. I need some new cutlery. This riddle reminded me of that. I was thinking about cutlery and I just want some really nice, cute cutlery. We went to the brew house the other day and their cutlery is like little hockey sticks. And I thought that is so cute. Not that I want that as cutlery, but anyways, I'm going on about cutlery too much. Okay, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.